Hello and welcome to this next episode of Questions on My Mind, which is an extremely important episode. It's all about mental health, and my guest, Mandy Legg, is a hugely respected TEDx and motivational speaker, amongst many, many other things. She talks about her harrowing and inspiring journey with mental health illness, suffering a bipolar episode in her 30s, which led to her being sectioned. But it gives us hope, and it's all about her overcoming that mental illness and the challenges that went along with it, to be the thriving person she is now, and achieving so many things that she's achieved since then. I'm going to put this episode out slightly early this month to coincide and in celebration of her new event, which takes place in Milton Keynes. It's going to be a monthly event and it's called Story Share MK. So it's in Milton Keynes. It's starting on the 14th of October, at the Box Art Central in Milton Keynes. Tickets for this are in the show notes. They're on Eventbrite. So there will be a few days left to get yourself down to that if you want to. So I'm putting this episode out early in honor of that, and so that you may have a last minute chance to get some tickets to that. It's all about sharing our personal stories so people can just step up and tell their unforgettable, funny, heart-stopping personal stories that are unscripted, unpolished, and just from the heart. So they should be thought-provoking, inspiring. So get yourself down to that. But in the meantime, watch this extremely important episode. Thanks, guys. Hello and welcome, guys, to another episode of Questions on My Mind. Today I've got with me Mandy Legg, who is a motivational speaker and author, traveling around talking all about her lived experience on her mental health journey. She was also the mayoress of Milton Keynes, from 2023 to 2024. So welcome, Mandy. Lovely to have you on the show because we're going to be talking about all things mental health.
Thank you, Jackie. It's wonderful to be here this morning on this beautiful sunny morning.
It is, isn't it? It's Bank Holiday Monday that we're recording on, and it's absolutely beautiful outside. A really lovely sunny day. I think it's going to be up into the 30s again today. So we've had an absolutely brilliant summer. But today is a topic that's very close to my heart and that I find to be a very important topic, very interesting topic, and one that I think is uh, very current in that I think there's a lot of people suffering out there at the moment, and so I think this is a very much needed topic. So thank you for joining me. Oh, and Mandy is also an author. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see this properly, but I have read your book, Hold On to Yourself, which again talks about you being sectioned and being in, I will call it a mental health institution
Hospital.
for hospital for how long was that for?
2 months.
2 months. Okay.
And that was
That's
30 years ago, just over 30 years ago.
it's quite a harrowing read in some parts of it, and there was a bit where you were talking about wanting to go and see the doctor to actually find out why you were there, and the doctor not responding to you, so you went off to go and see him. And it just the way it read was like a scene out of a movie where the nurses chased you down the hall and you know pinned you down and injected you and all of that. And it just reminded me of actually seen scenes like that in films, and it just made me feel quite uncomfortable. That
Yeah.
so um maybe we should just dive straight in, I think. So from what I picked up from reading your book, because your journey, it feels like to me was bolstered by the fact, and your recovery by the fact that you already had a certain view towards health and well-being, and you seem to have a pretty holistic outlook on life. And I think you were saying in your book that you were into homeopathy before your diagnosis, and your it was a bipolar episode, wasn't it?
Yes.
Before the bipolar episode. So, are you able to tell us a little bit about how you got into homeopathy and alternative therapies and that sort of thing?
Yeah. I mean, it was quite unusual, I guess, in those days because it was the
Yeah.
early 1990s, and holistic therapies, complementary therapies weren't really very much mainstreamed at that point. And yeah, I'd grown up on a council estate in a small town in Morton in Marsh. So, my background was not in that direction at all. And I went to uni and I studied psychology and human biology and sociology and all those things. And yeah, I guess that interest came out of when I was 17, I had my first panic attack. And in those days, nobody talked about mental health. It wasn't on the agenda at all. So I didn't share that with anyone, not even my parents or my friends or anybody. It happened in a sociology class, and I was reading these 4 sheets of tiny A4 writing. And after about half a page, I just said, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. And I refused to continue. And I wouldn't then read anything out in class through uni, through A levels. And it wasn't until I was coordinator of a community arts charity that I then had to do a lot of public speaking within that role that I started to address that issue. But I guess I was always looking for the answers to why did I have a panic attack? Why was anxiety part
Mm.
of my makeup in those sort of early 20s leading up to the bipolar at 30. So that's kind of how the homeopathy came in. I probably just met someone somewhere who was talking and sharing their views on health. And also, I remember once going to the doctors about having anxiety. And the doctor sending me away. This was an early 20-year-old young person who just moved to a new city and would be feeling quite anxious in a
Yeah.
new environment, and gave me a prescription for Valium. And I remember coming away and thinking, I don't think I should be taking this stuff. And
Yeah.
I didn't even know about, how addictive all of that was at that time. But I remember just thinking, no, that isn't the way to go. And then I
Yeah.
started reading books like Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And
Yes.
yeah, that's a real classic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's shaped my kind of way of looking at anxiety and in those 20s to 30s. And then when I had the bipolar episode, I my marriage was coming to an end at that point. I just moved out of the home I shared with my husband. Um, I felt that he was having an affair with one of my close friends, and they weren't being honest about that. And yeah, it kind of everything then kind of very quickly within a few days blew up into this psychotic bipolar episode. So it was a very sudden coming on, I was running a charity, and yeah, I didn't even take time off work to, before going into the hospital. It was literally, I was at work one day and then the next day in the hospital with all these kind of crazy things happening within this space of psychosis. So yeah, it was all very sudden, very quick.
Wow. So yes, because in the book you talked about on the day that you were sectioned, you needed two doctors and a social worker to sign off on that.
Yeah,
You ended up spending the whole day, so from 7:30 in the morning till
yeah,
10:30 at night or something, at
yeah,
your friend's house before being taken to the hospital.
yeah.
Um, and when you say at your friend's house, was that the same friend?
No, but that friend, that same friend, was in the house with me and the husband all day. So my other friend was on a course down in London, so she wasn't even in the house. I was in her house with my husband and the woman he was having an affair with, which came out, yeah, after I came out of the hospital. So yeah.
Oh, so you weren't aware of that when you were having the
Well,
episode.
I think I knew it inside me. I did. I was definitely. I'd seen all the clues, and I'd spoken with him about it, but he was denying it. So the only bit was he wasn't acknowledging it. But yeah,
Right.
I definitely knew that's what was going on at that point.
Okay. So what do you think? So when you had the panic attack, in your when you went to uni, there would possibly have been some stress there around being in a new place, just starting uni, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
That could have been a kind of a trigger. What do you think may have contributed as a trigger to the bipolar episode?
I think within that space of leading up to the marriage coming to an end, there was a lot of stress within that relationship. And I then turned into my work and put everything into my work. I just started this new charity in South Derbyshire at the time. I'd been there probably about a year, building it from scratch, and it was getting bigger and bigger, and I was kind of like carrying a lot of this organisation. And I think when I did go into the hospital, the trustees had to pick it up and other members of staff, and I think they realised that I'd been doing far too much at that point.
Mm,
I just started overworking because of the unhappiness in the marriage situation. And yeah, and then that all kind of built up to a head, and kind of it all went pop. I think you get to a point
yeah.
where it kind of goes over the top.
And these charities, what were they? You created the charities yourself, set up the
No,
charities
I applied for a post. It was in a local authority that was setting up the charity. So I was the coordinator employed to set up this charity as a local government post initially. And yeah, so I built trustees, a team of trustees, and a small team. And we were delivering community arts projects around the district of South Derbyshire with people that didn't normally access the arts, whether it's older people, young people, disabled people. So working in all different community settings.
Okay. So would you say you're quite a creative person as well?
Yeah, and that again I came to through working in the arts as a young person. I played instruments.
So, Mandy, when reading the book, you were talking about what you were experiencing during the bipolar episode, and you talked about being fearless and um, doing things that you would normally be afraid of doing. And I was thinking, that sounds great. Who wouldn't want to be fearless? So there was part of me that was thinking, well, what's wrong with
Being
being
fearless.
fearless? And so why was that considered part of the illness?
I think because there's two ways of looking at that. So when when I say I was fearless in that situation, so one I didn't know that I was experiencing a psychotic episode. So we often might think that there's a huge fear around what would it be like if I did have a severe mental illness that meant I was in a different reality, would I actually know it? So when I say fearless in that context, what I mean is I didn't know I was in a different reality, that my mind had taken me off somewhere else that wasn't normal and wasn't how everyone else saw the world. But I had no fear around that because I didn't know that I was in a space that wasn't my usual reality, if you like. So there was that side of it in terms of not feeling any fear around that happening to me, because you might think you'd be in a terrified state because you were aware that you were in that space of psychosis. But I had no awareness I was in a different space. It just felt like things were rolling along as they would do usually.
But
And the other side of that, in terms of the fearlessness, was yes, in a manic state, it is the bipolar disorder is the high moods and the low moods, and in the high moods, there is a kind of a state of feeling fearless. So I would be challenging things that I wouldn't normally challenge, like I remember there was a particular incident with someone who was seen as the bully around the people that I was around, and I was challenging that person in ways that I wouldn't have done normally. Or I was driving on the motorway, which was something I was absolutely had a phobia around and couldn't drive on the motorway. So I was driving on the motorway during that state. But there were also things I was doing that were where my mind was taking me into a space where, for example, I got in the car in the middle of the night, one frosty, dark night, and I imagined that my mind was telling me that the car could drive itself. So I didn't need to clear the window of the ice on the windscreen. I just
oh,
drove out of the space with the car as it was, and
okay.
very quickly hit another car. But that crash of smashing into the other car, or not smashing, that's a bit dramatic. It wasn't quite that, because I was only going at a very slow speed.
Mm.
But I hit another car. But that crash brought me back into kind of my normal, usual reality. And I left a note on the windscreen to say I'd hit that car, which you would imagine that you wouldn't do that in a psychosis.
Yeah.
But I did that, and then I drove off, and the headlight was like pointing up into the sky, and I went off driving into the middle of the countryside with the light shining up. And as you read in the book, I ended up in the trees, driving around with the light shining in the trees, and waiting until the sun rose, and sitting in the car in the dark, waiting for the sun to rise, which was magical. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was
Okay.
about around those things of having no fear.
Yeah. Because when I read about um generally being fearful about driving on the motorway, but then didn't not having fear around that, I initially thought, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it would
Something
be.
you would normally not
Yeah,
be able to do, but now you can do it. That
yeah,
sounds really good. But obviously, now that you've given the additional context, yeah. Um, so so when you hit the other car, that lucid moment, then I'm assuming that was very short-lived.
yeah. So I put the note on the car and then just carried on driving. And luckily, the window had either cleared by then or I cleared it. I can't remember that. But I was driving as usual into the countryside until I got into the middle of the trees and was, yeah, following the light bound in the trees.
Wow. Hmm. Okay.
And there were other things like having conversations with people that weren't there. So, like I was one evening, I went to see a friend, and I was staying at his house overnight that night, and his wife was cooking a meal. And as I arrived, there was a man outside who reminded me of my dad, and I was having this conversation with him like he was my dad, and he, in my mind, he was replying to me like he was my dad. And then when I went up and I was staying, I had a bath after the meal, and I was calling down to my friend's wife like she was my mum and speaking to her like she was my mum, and she, in my mind, she was speaking to me like she was my mum. So all kind of, things where my mind was playing tricks on me. I was having like smell hallucinations where in the car there was, if the air was blowing through the car, the heater, I would smell like either a really strong garlic smell or a strong cannabis smell, and that wasn't there. And yeah, so things like that would be happening in those few days, very few days before I was then sectioned and went to hospital.
So when you were saying that there was someone who reminded you of your dad, and were both your parents still, and are they still alive?
They were alive at the time, but yeah, they lived in Gloucestershire and I was in Derbyshire. Yeah, so they weren't local to me there. They have passed away now. My mum was 64 when she died, and my dad 84. So yeah, but sometimes I read this John DeMartini book, and he was writing about the kind of spiritual space where when you're in a kind of crisis in your mind, that you can kind of have these conversations with people that aren't there with you, but through other people. So
Yeah.
years later, I read that and I thought, oh, that sounds like what happened to me then.
And is there any history of any mental illness in your family?
No, not my nobody had had a bipolar episode in my family. I think anxiety was probably there, but was very much hidden in those days. I
Yeah.
mean, my dad, he lost his dad when he was 6. He died, and his mum died when he was 11. So he went to Dr. Bernardo's children's home at the age of 11, a naval school as was in those days.
Yeah.
And so he had a very traumatic childhood, as did my mum, and that her parents couldn't keep her when she was born. They worked in a old people's home. They weren't allowed to have a baby in the residential space they lived in. So she was sent to live with my mum's sister, her mum's sister, for 5 years, and then came back, and it was like she was coming back to strangers.
Mm.
So, in terms of all we know about attachment, she didn't attach to her own parents, and her life was quite challenging. Then seeing another baby be born in the family who did attach with the parents, and yeah, so there was a lot of trauma in my parents' life, and they also lost 2 babies at 1 week old. That both of them died before they even came home out of the hospital, which was the first baby they had. Then they had my sister, then my brother, then me, and then another baby that passed in the same way, and then I came. So I think there was kind of a lot of sadness and, anxiety probably in the family around those issues,
Mm.
which weren't talked about. I mean, nowadays, when I worked in children's social care, I worked with families that had lost babies at 1 week old, and they were very much part of the family. Whereas in our family, it wasn't talked about. So I kind of had this sense of all this sadness in the family, but didn't know it wasn't talked about.
Right.
And I remember in the hospital, the first week when my parents visited, I told them it was time for them to take their sadness away from me, because it was their sadness, not mine. And
Yeah.
that was quite a poignant moment between us. But I'm sure there was, the impact of growing up in a childhood where there is a lot of sadness that isn't talked about, probably had that impact on my mental health to create anxiety, and which then went on to be a bipolar episode.
Yeah.
So now we know a lot more about adverse childhood experiences and how they impact on young people's mental health, whether it's in childhood or in adulthood later.
And all of this stuff that you learn about, did you learn about this since having the episode?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think when I was in the hospital, we're talking about the holistic therapies again. I kind of had this thought came to me that I'd created these behaviours that were labelled as bipolar disorder by the psychiatric system, and if I could create them, I could uncreate them. So that little seed was sown in my mind in the hospital. And I also saw this man who was 60 and he'd been on, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, he'd been on the same medication I was on, lithium, for a long, long time and had been in and out of hospital. And I knew looking, seeing how his life had unfolded that I didn't want to, take that same path forward. So I guess that motivated me to find other ways of being able to stabilize my moods, if you like, and I came off the medication the psychiatrist said I'd need to be on for life within about 3 years. And I haven't had another bipolar episode or been on bipolar medication since then. So there was always this kind of mission to find another way. Um, and I guess that started with the camera in the hospital, taking the photographs of what I was experiencing inside that experience, and then going on to create the exhibition that I put up initially in the hospital games room, just some panels I'd put of some photos with writing and that I'd made during the night when it was quiet. And that then went on to become a national touring exhibition called Out to Lunch that was funded by London Disability Arts Forum. And they started the tour off in London Diorama Arts Centre. And it went all over the country.
Hmm.
And that was an amazing part of my journey, and that it allowed me to be able to share my story of what I'd experienced from within the experience. So that's, I guess, why BBC Two and ITV wanted to make programs about it.
So yeah,
Yeah, so seeing the BBC and ITV pick it up was amazing to be able to share that story nationally.
yeah. So there's something that you said that's stuck with me, and it's when you said I created all of these behaviors so I can uncreate them. Where did that come from?
I don't know. I, I just, I don't know, but I always remember that thought coming to my mind because years later I did Tony Robbins's programs in America,
Yeah.
and he talked about a key decision that at some points in life we might make a key decision. And I thought that was a key decision for me,
Yeah.
seeing my mental illness in that way that, I'd in some way um, made those behaviors happen by whatever means, that meant that I could then have that empowerment to make them unhappen and to create something else that didn't create those symptoms and that were part of that diagnosis. So it gave me, I guess, I felt empowered by having that thought. Even though I'm not saying that happened straight away, it took, that's been an ongoing process over the years coming out of the hospital. When I came out of the hospital, I was in a completely shattered state.
Yeah.
I couldn't stay in my house alone. I couldn't go out of the house alone. So,
It's just fascinating because that's way before its time. Like we now have Dr. Gabor Mate and we have
yeah,
other Bessel van der Kolk and all of those who talk about exactly what you're saying. And it just
yeah,
sounds like you were already all those years ago already in that space
yeah,
where you understood that not necessarily consciously, but inside of
yeah.
you, you had picked up on that somehow.
Yeah, I think so. And like, I don't know where it came from other than it just came into my mind.
Yeah.
And and it stuck with me, and I remembered it, and it was, yeah. And like you say, even in terms of what Tony Robbins, I learned from Tony Robbins in my 40s, I was, like you say, I was already thinking and working along those lines 10 years before I even went on those programs. And it was really good to find someone else that thought like I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously in 10 years, 15 years earlier, there wasn't anyone thinking or around me that was thinking in the same way. I mean, I married my second husband. He experienced severe depression, and he kind of saw it as he had to manage his symptoms. And whereas I saw it that I was going to kind of find a way to be without those symptoms, not just manage them. And that was, we'd talk about that a lot together, but we had very opposing ways of looking at the experience we were both having.
Yeah. So when you were in the hospital and you asked the doctor what caused it, and he said it was just a chemical imbalance,
Yeah,
but actually you picked up on it being something that some behaviors that you created to deal with something
yeah,
that may have uh, precipitated the chemical imbalance. It's kind of what came first, and it
yeah,
might be the events that came first that you were responding to because that created the stress response in the I'm not a doctor, I'm just
no,
these
with
are just thoughts that are coming
hypothesizing.
to me that created the stress response that then caused the chemical imbalance, not that you simply just have a chemical imbalance just came from nowhere kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And also, if you look at research around psychiatry now, there's a huge, big new movement in terms of metabolic mind, and which is a research organization in America. There's also um, psychiatrists exploring that in Edinburgh University in Bristol and London. So it's looking at how the mental health, severe mental illness like bipolar and schizophrenia and OCD, all sorts of things. People have used a keto-based therapeutic intervention alongside other things as well. But the main thrust of what has taken someone into recovery has been the keto, because of the impact of the fat burning instead of the glucose burning impact on the metabolism that goes into the brain. And yeah, so where people weren't responding to medication and had been on medication for years without any success, because not everyone gets success from the medications, um, then they've taken this new route under this research that's going on, and have found themselves to be in a space where they haven't then had any symptoms. And if I look back to that period of time in terms of metabolism, I worked in a sweet shop from the age of 12 to 22, and we were allowed to eat as many sweets as we liked. And I literally I lived in a home where we were given a bag of sweets once a week. So to be in a place where I could eat them as much as I liked, I did for
Yeah.
like 7 years. I totally ate all the little sweets off the children's table, the jars of sweets, the bars of anything that was available. So my way of eating during leading up to that period of time would not have been, what it is now. I still have a lot of addiction to those sort of foods because of having had that overeating in that period of time. But I think that could have been a part of the chemical imbalance as well, that, in terms of what we're eating, because as we know now, there's a lot more research on we are what we eat. And yeah, so I have recently, I did try keto for about 5, 6 weeks, and for me it's quite hard to do, but I did feel a sense of clear-headedness and real clarity in my mind whilst I was using that. and I will use it again, but I kind of stopped, because I am very kind of I still have a big problem with sugar, having spent that 10 years
Mm.
in that phase. So I can take it out for 6 months at a time, but as soon as I let it back in, it's a kind of an all or
Yes.
nothing response. I can't
Yeah.
just eat it in moderation. People say, can't you just eat it in moderation? Do you have to go all this extreme of not eating it, eating it? And I say, I try, but every time I'm in moderation, it gets to a point where it's not healthy. And I feel like I have no control over myself with those foods.
Yeah.
So
Just once you
yeah,
have a taste, it's almost like you're just back there again.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the ultra processed foods,
Yeah.
we know how addictive those foods are. That's why they're made in that way, with the balance of the fat and the sugar carbohydrate within them, to make people eat more of them, because obviously that's what the companies that sell them want us to do.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that because there is now also a lot that connects high sugar consumption to a lot of issues and or ill health that people have. And particularly for women, when they get to perimenopause and menopause, and it causing sort of like these cortisol spikes and um, sugar spikes and all that kind of stuff, that actually worsens some of their symptoms. And so that there's
Yeah,
just so much that we don't kind of appreciate or understand around what we're eating. Uh,
yes,
but like you, I quite like sugary thing or sweet things. I love chocolate, and dairy and things that I'm not really supposed to eat, but it's just I might not have it for a while, but then you go out and you have a taste
yeah,
of something and then it's all I'll buy one.
yeah,
Before you know it, you're having it every day again.
that's right,
So
exactly.
yeah, yeah, interesting. So are you aware of anyone else who has only had the one bipolar episode, or are you kind of unique in this?
I did, after you asked about that. I looked at the research, and it says that 10% of people will not go on to have another episode, but 90% will. Um, and the same with psychosis, that 90% of people having a psychotic episode will go on to have another one. Yeah, so I I do feel grateful that, whether it's what I've done to make that work or whatever, I can't, I can't say that it's absolutely, A, B, or C that's meant that I haven't had another episode. Doesn't mean that my moods don't go up and down. There is a bit of a roller coaster, and sometimes, like, I do struggle at times, but I'm usually able to find a way to work through that struggle. Like when I finished the mayoral year, being the mayoress, and that was a hugely intense and re rewarding, fulfilling, amazing year. And coming out of that, I'd stepped away from my role within children's social care. So I'd had like 11 years working in a very intense role in children's social care, and then the 2 years within the mayoral year, and then coming into a space where I was creating my business around speaking and writing my book. And but it was a very different kind of, you're not in the same intensity. And it was quite a difficult transition coming out of that, because your body's kind of all, used to running on adrenaline, and all
Yeah,
those, stress hormones are kind of zooming through you. And yeah, so to be in a space where there's kind of calm and peace was quite unknown and
yeah,
unrecognized. And it took a while for me to kind of, settle to that. But in fact, it was a bit like a grieving process. And there was a couple of weeks in the early weeks of that where I was literally just crying all the time. I didn't know why I was crying. I just needed to cry and let it out. And I just, it was summer, so I went to the river and the lake and swam and did paddleboarding, sat with friends chatting, and just kind of allowed myself space to come through that amazing, period of time into the next space. What am I creating now? How am I going to develop this business of being a speaker? And what does that mean for my day-to-day life? So yeah, there are the ups and downs during that time.
Now that's a really important thing that Mandy's just touched on, guys, around the stress and living in a state of stress becoming our set point. And we we just live in this sort of go, go, go um, sort of environment, so that we don't even recognize it as stress anymore. It's just
Mhm.
the way life is, not realizing that we're kind of just living on adrenaline and wearing ourselves out. And so there will be, you'd think there'd just be a, when it sort of dissipates and we're no longer in that space, but actually your body's so addicted to it, it's kind of like, no,
Yeah.
I need I need some stress. I
Yeah.
need to, this is not familiar to me. This relaxed sort of space is not familiar to me. Um, so that's a really, really interesting point, and something to, I guess what I'm trying to do is kind of bring it down slowly. I don't know if that will work or not, but instead of going from 100 to not zero, but
Yeah.
close to zero, it's kind of, how do I kind of just take the pressure off a little bit, go back, take the pressure off a little bit, just to get to balance, rather than go, 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 and then I'm
Yeah.
exhausted.
That's right.
Um,
Because in the mail year, it literally does go, 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 go. You might be doing 7 events in a day. And then the last day comes, you do the final speeches in the council chamber, and there's all the big celebration of the new mayor coming in, and your year stops. So, it stops just like that. And that can be quite a shocking kind of a shock for the body to be going from 100 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour.
yeah, fascinating. So, I'm just looking at the time, and I know you've got a hard stop. We're at 12 o'clock. And I think we should move on to the recovery phase. I did have a question around, shall I ask that? Yeah, I did have a quick question around, when you're in the hospital, you were talking about the side effects from the drugs and how they had you sort of pacing up and down, and um, there was some quite physical um, side effects as well. Did that get to a point where could you still tell the difference between what was the illness and what was created by the medication? Or
Yeah,
did it all just merge into?
I think it was about how other people who were visiting, so like friends or family would come and they'd see there were, things happening. Like there was one day my mum came and my mouth had all seized up and it was kind of like drooping on one side like Bell's palsy. And it was almost like for me, it was like, yeah, the staff would think, oh, that's just you playing up with, you're playing up or something. But it was actual, that was actually happening. So it was my mum that was then able to sort of make that known, rather than sometimes you weren't always listened to in that situation because it was perceived to be the condition, not what was happening with the medication. I mean, yeah, one day I ended up in the general hospital having a liver scan because I'd gone yellow, and having liver checked, and that was okay, thankfully. but yeah, that pacing up and down and not being able to sit still and constant restlessness, not being able to sleep, and all of that. It was difficult, I guess, to distinguish fully whether it was what was going on with the condition or what was going on with the medication. But yeah, it all felt quite extreme. My visitors would come and they'd have to follow me around. I wouldn't be able to sit still for more than a few minutes. And then I'd be taking them off on a journey somewhere around the hospital. It was a huge big place with great big grounds, and yeah, you could lay on the grass. There was even a social club that the staff used, and my friends would get a little pint of beer, and we'd sit on the grass, and in the evening for the hour they were there having a visit. So it was quite flexible like that. It was quite nice. But yeah, it was, I think once the kind of, when I went in, I was in a manic state. And once that started calming down, I didn't want to go so far. I didn't have the confidence then to walk across the other side of the site that the hospital was on. It all started kind of closing in and becoming much more, being terrified of everything, the anxiety state coming in that was there when I went home, to the point, like I said, I couldn't go out of the house alone or stay in alone. And my mum did kind of stay with me for 3 weeks, but I went to their house, they came to mine. But at the end of that, she said to the psychiatrist, how are we going to continue with this? Because he said, if you don't go home now, she's going to be dependent on you forever. So you need to kind of make that break before she's ready to make it. Because having separated with my husband, then I was living alone, which I hadn't lived alone before. I'd always lived with friends or, the boyfriend, husband, or family.
Mm.
So that was quite hard being in that space alone. And uh, I remember the neighbours were really helpful, even though when I came out, it was like I was thinking they were all staring at me and thinking, oh, where's she been? What's going on? How is she now? And they were looking at me, making sure I was, behaving in the usual way. But I had some very good neighbours in the street that helped me, and one introduced someone up the road who wasn't working at that point in time, and he took me across to this lovely park because I couldn't go there on my own. And I used to just go over there and walk with him sometimes. And then there was an old lady across the road who made cake and cups of tea, and I'd go and see her and her cat. And then my friends would come around with their children and take me out when I said, no, I can't. And they'd just take me anyway.
That's
So,
lovely that everyone supported you.
yes, yeah. And my sister sorted out my job because I think they would have got rid of me if they could have done. She made sure that was kept open for me. She also started sorting out the finances around the divorce and all of that for me. So it was almost like my life continued on its way because other people, I was like the driver of the train, I got off, but other people got on and kept those things moving. So I didn't lose my house, I didn't lose my job. I had those things to go back to when I was ready to do so.
Wow.
And yeah, which was amazing to have that support because people don't often have that level of support around them.
Yeah. So how did they decide? When did they decide that you were okay to go home? Because I thought that was a little bit, I don't know, like, how did they know it was the right time for you to go home?
I don't know. You kind of, before I was there for 2 months, and then in the last few weeks, you would have like the odd visit out. So that's when I went out for an afternoon and had my hair cut, or went to the art shop and got those art boards and made those pieces that I put up in the games room. And then I'd go out for a weekend, an overnight visit. So you'd go out and have the odd little half a day, and then you'd go for an overnight visit. And then what happened, I then came back and the nurse was waiting with all the bags and off you go kind of thing. So it wasn't even discussed with you. It wasn't discussed with my parents who, they lived 100 miles away. So it wasn't discussed with anyone at that time. It was just right, off you go.
So
Take
they didn't ask what support you had at home.
No, I mean, they saw I had a lot of support coming into the hospital, so they knew there was people around me and that my parents were around, but they didn't, they must have known that they lived 100 miles away. Um, but yeah, those decisions just were made at a point in time, which was I don't think there would have ever been a right time in the way that, the state I was in from having been in the hospital and having been through what I'd been through. I don't think there would have ever been a right time to come out. The same as there was not a right time to go back to work. The day it was like 5.5 months after I'd come out of the hospital, I went back to work. Um, and that day, my colleague said, I've never seen you look so nervous. And absolutely I was. And I think it was like those steps were taken well before I was ready to make them, because if they didn't get taken, then I would have remained in a state where I perhaps didn't go back to work,
Yeah.
didn't never went back to work in a charity, running an organization again, because I would have lost all belief that I could do that. But I think the people around me held that belief that, yeah, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And my sister arranged for me to go back, and I went back, a bit like, being out of the hospital. It was like, yeah. And then 5 months, 6 months later, because there'd been, a little bit of discrimination around me in that organization, I didn't feel the same about it when I went back. So 6 months later, I applied for a job in Milton Keynes and moved here. But at that point, like I said, I still couldn't drive on the dual carriageways. I went for an interview in a place in Milton Keynes, didn't realise the whole city was built on dual carriageways. Arrived and thought, oh, so I was shaking driving up these dual carriageways. But yeah, I had some hypnotherapy that really helped me drive around Milton Keynes. So I was able to kind of move on with that. So it's just like saying, I was never ready to make these steps, but somehow I was just kind of move forward, little step at a time.
And I think that's part of the feel the fear and do it anyway thing, isn't it? There's this notion that you need to do things before you're ready to do.
Ready.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
you've got to have this sort of 5% of fear or something like that to sort of motivate you and
yeah.
so yeah,
Push you
yeah,
forward.
yeah. So the recovery. Tell us about, because you in your book again you talk about there's these 7 steps that you take and that are this is how you I believe live your life now by maintaining these 7 areas.
I think it has changed over time, and I think what happened at first was being able to believe that I could make those steps and make those work for me. I mean, things like the fish oils were really helpful because there was research around that and low mood, which I read about, and I found that fish oils, a high dose of fish oils, and I've used that consistently. I still do use that now. But a lot of things will have changed along the way. I did the Tony Robbins programs, which helped to give me that belief that I could take control over what I wanted to create in my life, and moving forward, working within the arts, and then setting up my business, doing coaching and training, and then working within children's social care and working with families with complex needs, and being the mayoress, and then going into setting up my business, doing speaking with the NHS and sixth forms and businesses as well. So there's been a kind of sense of progression on the career level, which yeah, I support by um, looking at how I'm eating, and like I said, it's not always perfect. I know that the keto way of eating did enhance how my brain was functioning during that time, and I will be doing it again after I've had a holiday soon and coming back to it because I definitely did feel a big benefit in that. And things like meditation in different shapes and forms I've used over the years. I Dr. Joe Dispenza, like
Oh God, yeah,
his work, and
yeah.
I love his walking meditation track, and I've used that, and yeah, and I'm still using that to work on my health. So it's a combination of kind of like the physical things within your body, the cognitive things, how how you're processing and thinking and shaping the world that we're in, and how we can take control over that by using things like meditation and sound therapies and
Oh, sound healing, yes.
yeah.
Recently
So
found this sound healing guy on
have you?
on
Yeah.
TikTok, and
Oh,
he is absolutely brilliant. His
is
TikTok
he?
lives are brilliant,
Oh,
and
I'll have a look.
I've actually seen a difference in my health scores and sleep scores and all of that sort of stuff since I've been doing his sound healing sessions.
Oh, amazing. I'll have to have a look at that. Yeah, so all those kind of things over the years. And I think because I'm always looking and learning and researching and finding new things, and that's how I kind of keep my brain stimulated. It doesn't have to be kind of in a stress situation. It can be stimulated by trying all these things out and being a
Mm.
human guinea pig, if you like. That's how I kind of get um good stress, good hormones like the oxytocin and endorphins and the good hormones coming in. And the cold water swimming, yeah, that's been with me. I've been doing that regularly for the last 5 years now. And this morning I was at the lake before we spoke. So it's something that really kind of you're going on a sunny morning, the water's fresh and the nature around you and there's always people around as well. And so it's a very sort of social being out in nature. So that really, I love that. And paddle boarding, love being on the river paddle boarding and for the same reasons.
So it
And
sounds like you found, sorry, was there,
yeah, sleep is the other key one because that's a really big one. If I know very quickly if I'm not getting the right sleep, and I did it earlier this year. I had a real big problem because my husband started snoring really badly, and he was waking me up all the time. And I we were both trying different things, him to stop snoring and me to not be able to hear him. And I found these Oslo earbuds, which were made by Bose, but they didn't get enough people buy it. So some of their technicians took it on and called it Oslo and it works perfectly. So they sit in just inside your ears, so you can side sleep. It plays a white noise during the night. You can also put a track on. I put Paul McKenna's sleep track on that sends me off straight to sleep, and then it automatically, when I'm asleep, it goes on to the white noise and stays on that all night. So I literally can't hear anything outside of my own head. Can't hear any snoring or anything. So I'm having really good sleep now. So
wow.
yeah, that's they were expensive. They were like £300, but that was £300 well worth spent because the outcome of sleeping in separate beds would not have been a good one to have. We didn't want to do that.
Mm. So it sounds like all of the things we should be doing, the supplementation where it's needed,
Yeah,
the diet, um, exercise, so physical
guys.
movement,
Yeah,
working on your mindset.
yeah.
Um, is there anything we've missed out?
And I guess the kind of like the spiritual side with Joe
Yeah, I
Dispenza,
was going to say the spiritual
yeah,
side. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So I'm not
uh,
a religious person, but yeah, spiritual and quantum physics and believing we're all energy and
yeah, yeah. So that sounds like, well, from a spiritual perspective, that it sometimes feels like people have certain journeys in their life, even though they're challenging, and you wouldn't necessarily want to have these experiences, but they put you on the track to that.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm going to have to say it as it's coming to me. That
Yeah,
bipolar episode feels like it's put you on the track to a different life, a
yes,
fulfilling life, even though it was a bad experience in and of itself. What it gave
yeah,
you was what you have now.
yes, yeah. So it's almost like translating that pain into purpose, isn't it? So
Yeah,
taking a really difficult, challenging experience and recreating it into something that helps other people to believe that there is hope and life after mental illness, and that whatever struggles we have in life, we can find a way through them. And
yeah.
yeah, that's
Where I was going with that initially was to say, if we had all of that in place, then we may not end up in the place where we have
yeah,
the mental illness. But in order to be able to bring that to the world, maybe that was your path to bring this to the world.
yeah, that's right. And I think, you know, the village we create around us, that connection with our community, that's a really big part of what keeps people in that space as well, because we're meant to have people around us.
Yeah, we're social.
They're
We're
social
social beings,
animals.
and
Yeah,
we've lost a lot of that. And
yeah,
maybe that's a cautionary tale for us.
it
We
is.
need to keep that human connection going and not lose it to devices and things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Device, yeah, they can be useful, but we need to keep that human connection. I love all those programs on the blue zones and longevity and yeah, how people live within those parts of the world where we see the over 100 regularly people living to over 100 and more.
yeah,
Which is that's something that really fascinates me, and I think food is really at the heart of that. When you see like the communities where they might be living on, like in Japan or even in Greece, where they're living on mountains, and the soil is, you know, very different up on a mountain. It's not over agriculturalized, and so the ingredients in the soil that, you know, that a lot of our food is grown in is very homogenized. It's very, you know, lacking in nutrition compared to like 100 years ago, or what's in these like very special parts of the world that still exist. And yeah, and a big part of in those communities is the way they come together, and the way they, you know, they might come together with groups of neighbors to eat or to grow vegetables together, or, you know, to experience outdoor activities and exercise and things together. And yeah, so that's something that I'm really interested in, being 63 myself, is, you know, how to live life, um, a long, healthy life, not just to be kept alive by
yeah.
medication and, you know, and interventions, but to actually be at the optimum health that you can be. That's my goal for the next however many years I've got.
That just brought up a question. Do you think that's possible in our Western lifestyle?
I think it's incredibly hard. Like we said earlier, we I go back and forth as you do with those ultra processed foods. They haven't really, you know, they hook you in because that's how they're meant to be sold. To they. for people to get addicted to those substances, and it is hard because it's all around you, and it's like if you're going out socially, you know, and you want to stay on a really healthy diet, it's very hard then to blend in, not blend in, but to go out and be in the social spaces that may not have those values at their heart. And yeah, so I do find it incredibly difficult, and at times I'm very strict on adhering to all of those healthy things, but eventually it gets to a point where there's an event or something that's involving other people that it's just going to not be easy to do that,
Yeah,
and I end up kind of changing it back to the old stuff. All comes back in, and once you let a little bit in, it all comes back in for me.
for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Like I was working with someone in children's social care who was from Africa, and they'd lived in a place where there was fresh food, and and the family were able to eat in a healthy way. But in this country, the teenage child in that family had a health condition that meant he needed to do that, but he wasn't able to because of everything in the shops, and his people around him, his friends were doing, the opposite of that. And the mum was kind of like, the only way I can solve this is to go back to Africa and live in the village where I grew up, where this way of eating is easier to do because it's not, all around him.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
coming to the end of our conversation, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to say to viewers?
I think I'm now looking at developing a story slam space where people can come together, and it might be themed coming together. So it might be a women's coming together, it might be um, young persons or older persons. It could fit into lots of different categories, but people coming together to share their 5-minute stories.
Okay.
Because I think everyone has a story inside them, and we all can benefit from sharing each other's story and learn so much about our own self from hearing other people's stories, and it can validate, how we're feeling if we see someone else speaking about that. So that's something I want to create in the next few months in Milton Keynes, to bring together groups to share stories and just see where that takes me, really, takes a group.
So that would be a face-to-face event.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. It might go on to an online event, but I think initially the first one, it will start with the face to face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about, so we can put uh, some of this in the show notes, but for speaking engagements and stuff like that, um,
Yeah.
I guess, is that, do you only, is it Milton Keynes or are you
No, I speak
that one nationally?
all over the country. So in July, I was at 2 conferences for the NHS Mental Health Trust, working with people that supported people in mental health, autism, and learning disability. So I did those 2 events, and I've got another NHS one coming up in Doncaster in November, again for a mental health trust. So I go all over the country and happy to do so. And sixth forms and young people that are coming up to exams, really another good space that I like to speak in as well. I've done some in London and Milton Keynes, and businesses, whether it's looking at how businesses are looking at resilience within their teams and how they're responding to change and impacting from my story in that kind of space as well with businesses.
So if
So
people
yeah,
wanted to contact you to ask about a speaking engagement, they can th- visit your website or,
yes,
yeah, so
yes.
we
So
can put all of that. Yeah.
there's a speaker reel on my website and information about all of that on there. and they can see my TEDx talk as well. I was lucky enough to be able to do a TEDx talk back in March at Cranfield Uni. So
Okay.
that's been up online since April. So it's got about 10,000 views now. So that's going well. And I was a finalist for Women Leaders UK Awards as well in June. So, and also the STEM Awards in Milton Keynes back in March. So it's been an amazing few
Oh,
months, the last few months. And some of my exhibition was in Parliament as well for the new Mental Health Act going through Parliament. And Mind created an exhibition of artists' work that had been sectioned, and a couple of my images were put into that exhibition. So it was good to go down to Parliament in March and meet with my MPs down there, that was a brilliant experience as well. So it's it's good to see that the work I created over 30 years ago is still having an impact. And I think when I was speaking during about mental health, my journey during the mayoral year, that was what spurred me on to create the speaking business and write the book, because I could see how relevant my experience still was 30 years later, and how
more
people were,
relevant.
yeah, even more relevant in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been an amazing 6, 9 months over the development of everything that's happened.
That is so rich and so much to put into the show notes so that people can read all about your achievements, which are it's amazing what you've
Yeah.
managed to achieve. And we will also put in there your website. Are you on any social media or is it?
LinkedIn is the main one that I used for my business. Yeah, so I'll send you the link for that as well.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant.
Um,
Any final thoughts?
no, just if anyone has got a story inside them, come and share it in Milton Keynes.
Yes, come
And
to Milton Keynes
yeah,
to share it. Yeah, I
come
would
and
love
share
to
your story.
support that event. I would love to. Sounds
Thank
really,
you.
really good. The
And
power
just
of
and just to
storytelling
say, sorry, just to say finally that for people to have that hope, that there is hope, that there is life after extreme things happening, whether it's mental illness, divorce, separation, losing a job, everything happens in a way that it can come through to be something that takes you forward in a more empowered way.
for sure. Thank you for joining me, Mandy.
Thank you, Jackie. It's
That
been a
was a
pleasure. It's been
very enriching
amazing.
conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
So,
inviting me.
we will leave it there for this session.
Mm.
And I will put this up as soon as I'm able. I think this is a topic the world needs to hear. There are a lot of people who are suffering out there, so I think it's an important topic. So take care, everybody. I will see you on the next episode. And Mandy, if you could stay where you are for the minute and we will say goodbye off camera.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody. Take care.
Mhm.
Bye.